chain stitch, you're going to bring the needle through the fabric. You're going to go back down through the same hole, creating a little loop. Now you hook this loop over the needle and pull it taut. And then again put the needle through the same hole, bring it up a stitch length ahead, hooking that loop over. And as you can see here, I'm holding the yarn to one side with my thumb. That just keeps it taut and helps to create really lovely, neat stitches. And you just repeat this process. So you come up a stitch length forward, pass the needle through the centre of the new loop and pull gently. Now I like to use chain stitch for words or names. It's also really nice to create the outline of shapes. You can also use it to fill the space if you've got quite a lot of space to be filled. Next up we have backstitch. I like to use backstitch for outlining shapes. It's also really lovely for the stem of flowers. And you can use it for words or names when you want a much thinner effect. So what we're doing here is we're bringing the needle up through the fabric. We've brought it a stitch length forward. We're then inserting the needle down to the end of the previous stitch. So again, bring the needle up through the fabric a stitch length forward and back down through the end of the previous stitch. And just repeat this process along the whole of your line. Now stem stitch is one of my favourite stitches for the outline of shapes. It creates a really lovely 3D rope-like effect. It can also be used for the stems of flowers. So I've brought the needle up through the fabric and put it through one stitch length forward. I haven't fully pulled the yarn taut, but instead have held it to the side with my thumb as so. And then I've brought the needle up through the middle of the previous stitch. So stitch length forward, pull the yarn not fully taut, hold it slightly to one side and bring the needle up through the centre of the previous stitch. And then you pull it taut. So to one side, up through the centre, and ensure that when you're pulling the yarn to one side, make sure it's the same direction every single time. So as you can see here, I'm holding the yarn to the left with my thumb every time. And that just creates a really lovely rope-like effect. Now satin stitch is really good for filling in small smooth areas like leaves or petals. You bring your needle up at the one side of your shape, so here we'll bring the needle through the bottom of the shape, and you put it up through the fabric directly opposite, using long straight lines laid side by side. Now to keep this really neat, you want to ensure that each stitch is as close as possible to the previous one. Long and short stitch is my favourite stitch to use when filling in shapes that need a little bit more texture, such as animals. This is a variation of satin stitch, and we're using alternating stitch lengths to create a softer or textured fill. So here we're going through one side of the shape, and we're popping the needle back through the fabric, just at all different lengths, creating a little bit of variety. And you can see here the difference in texture for the long and short stitch as opposed to the satin stitch just next to it. Split stitch is my favourite for creating textured lines. So I'm bringing the needle up through the fabric, popping it down one stitch length forward. Then bringing the needle up again another stitch length forward and inserting the needle into the centre of the previous stitch, splitting the stitch as such. So here we have it again, one stitch length forward and bring the needle back through the centre of the previous stitch. It's quite similar to back stitch, although we're piercing the previous stitch rather than finishing at the end of the stitch. Now for lazy daisy stitch, we're bringing the needle up at the point where the petal starts, then popping the needle back down through the same hole. You've created a little loop here, and you've brought the needle up through the end of the petal, inside the loop, and inserted that small stitch over the end of the petal, anchoring the loop into place. So again, up and through the same hole, creating a loop, then bring the needle through the end of the petal, inside the loop, and just anchor it into place. Now this stitch works really well here for petals, but it's also a really lovely effect for things like the wings of bumblebees or the leaves on trees. Now, woven wheel is the stitch that we use to create roses when embroidering flowers. So I've brought the needle up through the centre of the fabric and then down into the edge of the circle. We're going to do this 5 times. So you bring the needle up and through the centre, up at the end and through the centre, 5 times over, and this is just creating little spokes which act as the base of the rose. Once all of those spokes are complete, I'm bringing the needle up just slightly off centre. What we're going to do is we're going to go over, under, weaving the needle and the yarn through the spokes. You do this in a continuous clockwise motion until all of the yarn has been used up and the whole shape is filled. Now, Fishbone Stitch is a really simple but effective stitch for leaves. So I'm doing one straight stitch down the middle of the leaf, then I'm going to bring the yarn and the needle through the bottom, and I'm piercing the fabric at the end of where that first stitch was. So then I'm bringing it through the top and down through the middle again, just running in parallel with the previous stitch. So every time through the bottom, through the middle, through the top, through the middle, continuing in this little diagonal fashion. And you can follow the little lines that you've got on your stitch and stick pattern to ensure that the yarn is going in the right direction. And you just continue this really simple stitch all along the leaf until the whole shape has been filled. French knots is what we use to create the centre of flowers. So you bring the needle up through the fabric, and then I'm holding the yarn taut with my non-needle hand and wrapping it round and then pulling the needle back through. You can wrap the yarn round once, twice, or as I'm doing here, I'm going to wrap it round 3 times to create a larger knot. So the more times you wrap the needle round, the larger the knot